Welcome back, everybody. We are here with another Dynasty Risers video. We're a little late on this one for obvious reasons, but it is July 21st. Training camps are starting to get underway. We had Chargers and Lions starting up because they play in the Hall of Fame game. A lot of other teams. I think the Cowboys started today, and some other teams. So it's football season, man. We're here. We are 6 weeks or so away from the NFL season being here. We're just a couple weeks away from a bunch of preseason games happening, and we're talking about some dynasty risers. Obviously, a lot's going to change over the next month or so. We're going to get a lot of hype from players, especially rookies. But we're starting off here with Christian McCaffrey moving up from 18 to 15. And this is just what happens with veteran players, right? When veteran players, when it gets closer to the NFL season, veteran players always rise in value. That's why they're pretty good buys when you're trying to, buy low on a veteran player, especially around the NFL draft and rookie drafts, because people just have rookie fever. And then it kind of goes away a little bit. The redraft community starts to get back into things right around this time. And when that happens, you start to get the veteran players moving up. And when it comes to Christian McCaffrey, I mean, if the guy's healthy, he's going to be maybe the best player in fantasy. That's just as simple as it is. Um, I don't really see how he is not a top five running back if he's healthy all year. I mean, you even look at last year. I know he barely played last year and killed a lot of people when it came to fantasy. But even when he came back from his injury, he missed the first, first 8 weeks of the season. And his first game back, the 49ers used him 87.5% of the snaps. Next game, 93.7, 81.6, and then he got hurt in week 13 and then missed the rest of the season. Now, was he great in those games? No, but he was still really damn good. I mean, he was over 100 total yards in two of the three. He had 13 catches in those first 3 weeks, 15 on the season in 4 games. Didn't score a touchdown, which was a big thing. But I know there's this fear of like, oh, the 49ers are probably going to limit him and things like that. Maybe, but they didn't do it last year in the middle of the season. I know they kind of needed a win last year, so that may have been part of the reason. I think at that point they had won 4 games, lost 4 or 5 games. They were kind of middle of the road, but they just threw him right back to the Wolves, kind of. And I kind of see them doing that again. Maybe they use a Garendo a little bit more, but McCaffrey's going to play. I'd be surprised if he fell under 70% of the snap count. And he's going to be a top five running back in fantasy football, maybe the best player in fantasy football in 2025 if healthy. Another running back. We're actually starting off with 3 running backs here. We have Jonathan Taylor moving up from running back 11 to running back 9. Not 100% sure why. I mean, it's only 2 spots, but when you're already in the top 12, moving up 2 spots is kind of significant. What's interesting about Jonathan Taylor is like when you actually look at some of his stats from 2024, it wasn't that far off from his 2021 stats in terms of rushing. He averaged 102.2 rushing yards per game last year. In his big year in 2021, he averaged 106.5. So he was only like just under or just over 4 yards per game less than what when he rushed for over 1,800 yards in 2021. Now, he's not going to catch the ball as much. He was only getting 1.3 receptions per game. He's never been a big catch guy in general. Again, even during his first few years, he has never averaged more than 2.5 a game. I don't really see that changing too much with Anthony Richardson and potentially Daniel Jones, one of those two being the quarterback for most of the year. But I could see Jonathan Taylor, if he's healthy, again, 16, 17 games. This guy, there's not a lot of guys you put money on rushing for over 1,500 yards. Jonathan Taylor, to me, is one of those guys, in my opinion, that's going to rush for over 1,500 yards if he plays, 15 plus games. So another thing about him is the touchdowns. I mean, he had 12 touchdowns last year, and that Colts offense was kind of dysfunctional at times. I think it got better down the stretch, and Jonathan Taylor got better down the stretch. I know a lot of people like kind of remember JT as like he didn't help me get to the playoffs because he missed 3 games kind of early on, middle of the season. He kind of had some down games when he came back. His first 6 weeks back from the injury, kind of 4 of the 6 were not great games. But he absolutely destroyed in the playoffs. The problem is a lot of people didn't make the playoffs with Jonathan Taylor on their team, but he was a monster in the playoffs there. He rushed for 107, 218, 125, and 127, 127 yards. He also had 6 touchdowns during that time. So I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be awesome if he stays healthy. And I do think this offense can improve. That being said, if Anthony Richardson is the quarterback, there is going to be a little bit of some goal line stealing touchdown concerns. But I just feel like when they get to the goal line, it's going to be all Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. We already know that Anthony Richardson's a little bit of a he's a suspect passer to say it nicely, to put it nicely. So when they get to that red zone, when they get to the 10-yard, 5-yard line, I don't see them throwing the ball that much. They're gonna take advantage of the RPO and take advantage of you have 2 elite runners in the backfield with Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. So I could see a pretty good season from Jonathan Taylor. We're talking 1,700 total yards and 12 touchdowns potential here. Another running back we got is Dylan Samson. Now, Dylan Samson's always obviously moving up because of the Quinshon Judkins news. And if you guys have watched this channel and you've been watching us kind of all off season, especially when were putting out a lot of the rookie content, I was big on Dylan Samson. I was taking Dylan Samson mid second round in almost all of my drafts, mid to late second round. That I forget exactly where, but that 205 to 210 range. And I even got him in the third sometimes. I was all over Dylan Samson. I loved his film. I loved his analytics. I loved his production in college. Obviously, didn't love that he went to a team of he was drafted by the Browns when they had already taken Quinshon Judkins. That being said, couple things here. One, I was still hopeful for Dylan Samson, even assuming that this was before the Quinshon Judkins stuff started to come out. I was hopeful for Dylan Samson, just because the Browns utilize 2 running backs. They have for a long time. I mean, you go look at prime Nick Chubb. There was very few years, maybe 1 year there, where they were really giving the workload all to Nick Chubb. You go back to like those couple of years where both Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb were tearing it up. They were kind of using those guys 50-50. And I don't really see that changing too much. I think that's how the Browns want to operate. And you throw on the extra layer of there's some question marks around Judkins now, in my opinion. There are some question marks around him. He obviously is having his legal issues, but he's also not signed to his rookie contract. A lot of second rounders, I know they're signing, especially over the last several days as training camps are starting up. But he's one of those guys that hasn't signed yet. And could the Browns potentially say, you know what? We're not even going to get ourselves involved with this situation. We're already involved with the Deshaun Watson situation. We don't want to guarantee this guy a bunch of money like a lot of second rounders want. They want fully guaranteed stuff. It's not a lot of money, but it's fully guaranteed. They could just be like, hey, we have Jerome Ford. We have Dylan Samson. You need us more than we need you, Quinshon Judkins. Maybe. Do I think it's going to happen? No, but there's a possibility. And I just kind of like this idea. I kind of like this idea of like Dylan Samson is going to get a lot of the reps, especially in the beginning of training camp. So arrow up on Dylan Samson. I was already high on the guy, and now I think the opportunity is kind of there for him, and I just think he's a really good player. Tyreek Hill has moved up from 41 to 37. This is probably in a reaction to the Jonnu Smith trade. Tyreek Hill is an interesting one because, man, look where he's ranked. Keep trade cut, wide receiver, 37. Now, is Keep Trade Cut a perfect resource, a perfect tool? No, but it gives you a general idea of kind of where dynasty players are at with these these players. And Tyreek Hill is there at wide receiver 37. And he's a guy that if he is right and the Dolphins offense is right and Tua is healthy, we could be seeing a huge season from Tyreek Hill, kind of a league winning wide receiver 1 overall type of season. There are some risks here with Tyreek Hill. Obviously, one of them is he just over the hill, but I don't really think so. I mean, the speed is still there. I do think the wrist injury probably bothered him a bit more than maybe we thought because it's a wrist injury and it's not a lower leg injury or anything, but the speed is still there. He just turned 31. Well, he's 31 years old. He turned 31 in March. it's July already. So he turned 31 in March. We've seen wide receivers produce at the age 30, 31, even 32 years old and older. The elite ones do. And I just think I think the Dolphins obviously are going to want to keep that short game aspect, but they know their bread is buttered with Tyreek Hill making big plays. That's how the offense wins. That's how the offense is elite and scary. And I think they try and get back to that, knowing that this is probably the last year. The Dolphins, this iteration of the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and McDaniel and all of that, like this might be their last year. This might be their last hurrah, and I think they're going to try and go for it. So I mean, I'm interested in buying low on Tyreek Hill if I can, especially if I'm a contender. Even if I'm not a contender, and I think I can get Tyreek Hill at a pretty cheap price, even if I'm a rebuilder, like I may, take them on and then flip them in October. Like I'm definitely not flipping them now if I'm a rebuilder, unless I'm getting kind of what I think he should be valued, which is valued as a guy is, yeah, he's a little bit older. There's some question marks around him, but if he hits, he could win you fantasy leagues. Malik Washington is another Dolphins player here. And, Malik Washington, maybe a lot of people forgot this, but he was a sixth-round pick last year, sixth-round rookie last year, went to Virginia, very productive at Virginia. He played at Northwestern for 4 years in college, didn't do too much. He had a couple years of production. Then he transferred over to Virginia, and the dude went off. He went 110 catches, over 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns. He is a smaller guy. He's five. He's like he's one of those guys that's like 5'9", 5'10", under 200 pounds type of player. But he started to come on a little bit at the end of last year. Malik Washington did. So Malik Washington, and I'm just double checking the numbers here. Malik Washington, the last 4 weeks of the season, he put up in total. He had 20 targets, so he was getting 5 targets a game, 4 catches a game, and about 40 yards per game over the last 4 weeks of the season. Didn't catch a touchdown or anything, but I mean, you tell me a guy that's getting 4 and 40 in this deeper dynasty leagues and things like that a lot of us play in. I mean, we're talking about a guy that could potentially have 70 catches and 700 yards. And if you get some touchdowns, like that could be start worthy. And I'm talking about in these kind of 12 team start 12. So plus he can take a step up. I mean, he was a 6th-round rookie. So to see him kind of come on at the end there is always like, okay, there's something to hold on to. I can hold on to you, Malik Washington, because you came on last year. And look, they just got rid of Jonnu Smith. So we're worried about Tyreek Hill potentially. Jonnu Smith is gone, who, by the way, Jonnu Smith put up big numbers last year in terms of just like catches and targets. I know maybe his yardage wasn't quite there, but we're talking about a guy that had 111 targets and 88 catches. Now, they bring in Darren Waller, okay? Now, Darren Waller obviously retired for a year. He couldn't stay healthy the last couple of seasons that he played, Darren Waller. He's going to be 33, within the first couple of weeks of the NFL season. Plus, like we said, couldn't really stay healthy there. Missed 8 games and 5 games. He missed, let's see here, he missed about 19 games combined over his last 3 seasons in the NFL. Plus, he sat out a year. If we're worried about Tyreek Hill being over the hill, we're worried about Waller staying healthy, where's the production from Miami going to come? Is it going to come in a guy like Malik Washington? Potentially. So he's moved up, and I get why. And he's definitely a guy that 100%, if he's out there on waiver wires because you play in maybe shallower leagues, I'd be snatching him up. If I can get him as like a throw-in, or even trade like a 4th-round pick for him, I just might do it. I know they brought in Nick Westbrook-Akine as well, but there's a chance for Malik Washington to kind of do something this year, and opportunity is there. Am I saying he's going to produce? No, but I think the opportunity is going to be there for him. Mike Gesicki moving from 37 to 32. I've never really understood why Mike Gesicki has kind of been ranked this low. Very productive last year. Now, albeit it was kind of inconsistent. And that's just due to Mike Gesicki. I think a lot of people will be shocked by this. Mike Gesicki, over the entire season, did not play combined 50% of the snaps for the Bengals last year. He was not over the 50% snap share for the Bengals. He played in 17 games. By the way, he hardly misses games. Just kind of noticed that. And he played in 46% of the snaps. Not what you expect from a guy who had 65 catches and 665 yards. You expect those guys to be playing 60, 70% of the time. I don't really see, I kind of see like a rinse and repeat for Mike Gesicki. I think the Bengals are just going to kind of run it back with who they have. They know what their team is. Their defense probably improved, but a good chance it's not great again, so they're going to have to throw for a bunch. Mike Gesicki was the tight end 13 last year, so he was just outside of being a tight end 1 last year in total points, and tight end 19 in points per game. Now, the problem with Mike Gesicki is he gives you games like 0.1, 0, 0, right, 3.4, and that's just due to him not playing that much. He's kind of a boom bust tight end. Um, but he has games like 7 for 91, 5 for 100, 5 for 53, 10 for 86. That's what I want for my tight end. Like, I'll take a boom bust tight end over a guy who's potentially, just, I don't want a guy that's always just going to give me 8 points per game. I'll take a guy who's going to give me 16, double digit 18, 15 points in games. And if that happens, if I built my team the right way, well, then I'm going to win that week when my tight end, Mike Gesicki, gives me 18 points. It's just like, okay, I've locked up that win. I'll take that over a guy who just consistently gives me 8 or 9 points per game. So I kind of see it as a rinse and repeat for Mike Gesicki. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be productive. He's kind of the new Tyler Boyd in this offense. I mean, if we're thinking of Joe Burrow throwing 4,500, potentially 5,000 yards, and you start doing mental math here and you say, okay, let's just eliminate 3,000 yards going to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, right? And that's maybe even a little bit of like, if those two combine for 3,000, that's a lot, right? That's like, I'm thinking 17 and 13 or something like that, which is possible, but if I had to bet the under, I might go slightly under there. Okay, so where are the other 1,500, 2,000 yards passing going? Obviously, you have some other wide receivers there like Yoshi Voss or Jermaine Burton if he takes the next step. You have the running backs who are going to account for, 400 of those, 500 of those. So it's like, where's this extra 1,000 yards coming from? And it's probably a lot of it's going to go to Mike Gesicki, 60, 70% of it to Mike Gesicki like it did last year. Courtland Sutton from 47 to 43. Courtland Sutton's always been a little bit underrated. Like, people just don't get excited about Sutton. I think last year was like the first year where we actually were excited about Sutton since, his 2019 season. And I get it, but now we're talking about a guy who seems to be kind of thriving in the Sean Payton offense. 18 touchdowns over the last 2 years. I don't really see his touchdown production going away. He's kind of the main weapon for touchdowns in that offense when you kind of just think of, okay, who's on the Denver Broncos? You got some potential running backs there. Obviously, there's always going to be rushing touchdowns. You got Bo Nix at the goal line and stuff like that. But then it's like, okay, you have Marvin Mims, Devon Vele, Troy Franklin. Like, this is Sutton's receiving room. Like, it's his team, in my opinion. Evan Ingram's there, but like, I would be pretty surprised unless Bo Nix takes a big step backwards. I think we're going to see a very similar season. Kind of 130 plus targets for Courtland Sutton. He's probably going to give you 80, 85 catches, and he's probably going to give you close to 1,100 yards and 8 plus touchdowns if Bo Nix has, either a similar season or a slight improvement. So again, we're talking about a guy who is going to be very, very productive for his team, right? He's going to be extremely productive, and we're just not valuing him the right way. He's 29 years old. He'll turn 30 this year. Could we see a couple more years of Courtland Sutton? I'm not counting this as like, okay, I'm season to season with him. I see a couple more years from him of just nice productivity. I didn't see the Broncos really make a big move to really worry me about Sutton. He was the wide receiver 26 in points per game last year, and he was definitely better than that. Wide receiver 15 in total points, and then he really started to come on. The second half of the season. You look at his second half, and he absolutely went off. He had double digit points from week 9 onwards, or week 8 onwards. He had double digit points. He fell below 15 in PPR 3 times. 3 of 3 games in the second half of the season was he below 15 points, 15 PPR points per game. So Courtland Sutton, I think, is incredible value as well. Just a lot of good value with these veteran players that I would try and go out and get. Marshon Lloyd from 58 to from 58 to 52. Now, it's always tough with these players who get, I liked Marshon Lloyd coming out of college. Guys like Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet year one, some other players out there. Like, I liked some of these players. I really liked Marshon Lloyd. I had him very high up my 2024 rookie running back rankings. It wasn't a great class, but he was up there. He was definitely in my top five. I think he was closer to like my top three, maybe in my top three. He was either my RB3 or 4 last year. Drafted in the third round to the Packers, so I was excited about the draft capital. I was excited about the opportunity. He had some injuries, and he did nothing. So it's always hard with these guys, the Trey Bensons of the world, the Marshon Lloyds of the world, the Jalen Wrights of the world. It's like, okay, they got good draft capital. I like the situation for them to be the potential RB2 for the team, but they didn't do anything year one. I'm trying to get Marshon Lloyd, and again, it's not necessarily just trading straight up for him. It's getting him in as a kind of a throw-in, to another trade. Okay, we're making this trade, these are the pieces we're trading for. Hey, can you throw in Marshon Lloyd for me to make this trade? Because you look at the Packers and they are running it back with their running back room, no pun intended. Josh Jacobs, Marshon Lloyd, Emmanuel Wilson, and Chris Brooks. Those are the 4 guys. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is awesome, and Josh Jacobs is going to continue to be awesome. However, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but last year, the Packers gave a lot of touches to their other running backs. They gave quite a few touches here that I'm going to add up and tell you. So the 3 running backs not named Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, Chris Brooks, and Marshon Lloyd himself, had 178 touches last year. Now, Chris Brooks, Emmanuel Wilson had like 113. Chris Brooks had close to 50. Marshon Lloyd close to 20 touches. So we're talking about 100, almost 180 touches were given, which is kind of crazy to think about because we know that Josh Jacobs himself had over 330, I believe. He had over 300 carries. So I think that would surprise people to a certain extent. Like, wow, not only did Josh Jacobs get over 300 carries, but guys like Chris Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson also had another 130 on top of it. What if that all gets consolidated to a guy like Marshon Lloyd, a guy who I think can be a little bit more of that explosive type of player that maybe doesn't need 300 touches, that he could be kind of the RB2 that is very efficient and for that reason gives you still good production. I could see that from Marshon Lloyd. I really could. So, you look at the Packers running backs last year, Josh Jacobs, 4.4 yards per carry, Emmanuel Wilson, 4.9, Chris Brooks, 5.1. We're talking some pretty high yards per carry. So if we're giving potentially Marshon Lloyd, 4.5 yards per carry or something like that, right? He gets 160 carries and he gives you a 4.5 yards per carry. Nothing to write home about, but we're talking about a guy that's going to rush for over 700 yards and is going to increase his value. Plus, with the possibility of Josh Jacobs getting hurt, I kind of like Marshon Lloyd this year. Dante Thornton, another player that's getting some hype. He's big, tall, and fast, and he's playing with the starters already. That's what the OTAs, what we heard in the OTAs, and Dante Thornton's going to be interesting. Obviously they have, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Jack Besh, but Thornton's out there. Tucker's there. Guys like that are there. They're going to run the ball a lot, but I get why Thornton is going to play potentially with the starters because his skill set is very, very hard to find. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good or productive for fantasy football, but the skill set is really, really hard to find. Think of guys like MVS, right? MVS is one of those guys who's tall and fast. He's 6'4". He runs really, really fast. Mecole Hardman was another one of those guys. Oh, sorry, Mecole Hardman wasn't tall, but he was a little bit faster. But a guy like MVS is a perfect example of a player who, this player is very important for the offense to function as a whole, but it never really translates to fantasy football. I know MVS had a little bit of a stretch there, last year with the Saints, but generally it hasn't panned out for him. And that's why these players are coveted. And that's going to get him on the field, which is good for fantasy production. Of course, I'm excited if I have Thornton, but if I could sell him for anything more than what I drafted him, like decently more, if I drafted him in the late fourth and I can get a late third potentially for him, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bank on just him not panning out for fantasy football. Hunter Henry from 35 to 31, another player who, if you go and look at the production Hunter Henry had with Drake May when those two players were healthy on the field together, it's actually pretty insane. Like Hunter Henry was actually really, really good last year in terms of targets and catches. Where he fell short was the touchdowns. He wasn't really giving you the touchdowns, which is kind of funny because um, that's kind of what we know Henry for a little bit, I would say. Not necessarily touchdowns, but kind of being like a touchdown or bust type of player. I mean, he's had seasons in his career of 8, 9, and 6 touchdowns. Like you combine that with what he did last year, where he set career highs in targets, receptions, and yards. He only had 2 touchdowns. You give him 4 more touchdowns with those numbers: 66 catches, almost 700 yards, and 6 or 7 touchdowns. We're talking about a low end fantasy one, tight end one, and especially when you look at the Drake May numbers. You think about the Patriots and their receiver room. Could it be better? It should. That being said, there's no like for sure, there's no room for Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's going to get his. He's a talented tight end who can be started as a streamer and potentially could finish as a low end tight end one, and it would not surprise me whatsoever. Next up, we have Elijah Arroyo moving up from tight end 25 to tight end 20. This is only going to go up because, I mean, we just got the Noah Fant news 1 or 2 days ago. I can't remember if it was Sunday or Saturday that we got it. So this will probably continue to go up, the Elijah Arroyo news, the Noah Fant news being released. My only concern about Elijah Arroyo year one is going to be his ability to block, right? That's always what's going to slow down tight ends year one. That's generally why tight ends for years and years and years have always been, they take some time to develop. Now we've been kind of spoiled the last couple of years, but rookie tight ends in general, pretty tough for them to break out. But again, we've had Tyler Warren, we've had Sam Laporta, we've had guys, break out year one the last couple of years, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the new norm. And again, the big thing about it is the blocking. And those two players, Bowers and McBride, were good blockers. Were they elite or anything? Maybe not, but they were both good blockers, maybe above, really good blockers in college. And Elijah Arroyo just kind of wasn't used that way. He was kind of used as more of a stretch the field kind of tight end, get down the field, up the seam type of tight end. And those type of players, they just don't get on the field enough. That's the biggest issue. And that's like the biggest hindrance to a tight end breaking out is, can you get on the field? If you can get on the field and you're good at receiving, then you're going to put up some points. You're going to put up some fantasy points. So now we could talk about, well, who's there? Who do they have there? Who's going to stop Elijah Arroyo? And really, the only guy that could possibly do it is a guy, AJ Barner, right? Who was, I believe, a 4th-round pick in 2024. Coming out of Michigan. So we know that he's already a pretty good blocker. He's had a year kind of in the system. I know it's a new system and all of that, but he's had a year with Seattle. He's had a year in the NFL, and he could be a player that kind of keeps a player like Elijah Arroyo off the field more than we would expect. So excited for what we see with Arroyo. Just want to see something. I want to see a glimmer of hope, some potential there. If not, kind of a solid season. But my expectations, I'm kind of tempering them a little bit. Year one, if I'm plugging him into my lineup already, if I'm thinking he's going to be a part of my lineup, then my team might be hurting just a little bit. Just 2 more players for you here. Xavier Legette from 64 to 59. And it's so easy to forget that like Xavier Legette was a 1st-round pick, right? Because even as a 1st-round pick, and when I go back to rookie drafts in 2024, he was taken behind Keon Coleman, behind Lad McConkey, even behind at times between of guys like Jalen Polk and stuff like that. So I get why we are a little bit hesitant of Xavier Legette, because I think a lot of people weren't really high on him coming out of the draft, didn't think he'd be a 1st-round pick, think he has all the potential in the world, but doesn't quite have, maybe all the tools we need, or there's something off. Like, why did he break out? Why didn't he break out until year 5 in college? There's some reasons as to why he didn't. But then he went to the Panthers, which we are already kind of down on the Panthers a little bit, but I think it's pretty incredible value. Like, why should a guy like Xavier Legette be so much further down the rankings than a guy like Ricky Pearsall? Why? And people are just going to say, well, like, you can't use the argument of one has better draft capital because they were both late first round picks. You can't use the excuse of age because they're both essentially the same age, right? You can't use the excuse of, well, one of these players broke out last year and the other didn't, because they didn't, right? Neither one of them were that productive last year. I know Ricky Pearsall had a couple of games near the end of the year, and I'm kind of high on Ricky Pearsall as well. But you can't use that excuse. There's really no excuse to say, besides the fact that like Pearsall was a little bit more productive over the course of his college career. He was kind of had 3 years of production versus Xavier Legette kind of had 1 year, but he had one big year and nowhere close. Pearsall was nowhere close to what Legette did his last year in college. Pearsall never had over 1,000 yards in college. Xavier Legette went for over 1,250 yards. So, like, the only reason we have Pearsall, by the way, all the way up as where's he at right now? Ricky Pearsall, all the way ranked all the way up at wide receiver 33. Yet we have Xavier Legette, who's wide receiver 59. That just seems a little strange to me. Again, I like Pearsall more than Legette. I would bank on Pearsall breaking out over Legette. But that doesn't mean I'm right. And that doesn't mean that I'm justified, or that we are justified as a Dynasty community to have Xavier Legette as wide receiver 59 and Ricky Pearsall, 26 spots higher when they're both former first round picks. Neither of them produced last year, and you could make an argument that Xavier Legette has more opportunity in terms of like his targets and his competition. I mean, obviously they drafted Ted McMillan, which is going to bring Legette down a little bit. But besides that, it's like, well, who's the wide receiver 2 for the Panthers? Is it Adam Thielen, who's like 34 years old? Is it Jalen Coker, right? Like, is it Hunter Renfrow? Like, who is the wide receiver 2? Whereas with the 49ers, you have Kittle, you have Juwan Jennings, Ayuk when he comes back, you have Christian McCaffrey coming back. So I get it, better offense, and that's a big reason why. But that doesn't, to me, justify a ranking of a 26 position ranking gap for these players. So I think he's definitely a guy that I want to take a shot on. I guess the other reason why people might be a little bit higher on Pearsall is that Legette did have much more playing time than a guy like Ricky Pearsall, and for that reason, he didn't show out as much. That could be also part of the reason. And then finally, Travis Kelce from 20 to 16. And again, it's the veteran bump, right? We were down on Kelce until we knew he was going to come back, but it was the veteran bump for Kelce that we're seeing here. And, it's always crazy to go back and look at that. Travis Kelce had almost 100 catches last year. He had 97 catches. Now his yardage is going to be down. His yards per reception was the lowest in his career by a pretty significant margin. I think it's about two yards per reception. He's gone down from, mid 12s to 13 to about, about 9 or 10 the last couple of years. And so that's a little bit concerning, but also he only had 3 touchdowns. Like, I could see Travis Kelce have 8 touchdowns and still catch 80, 85 passes and still have 800 plus yards, and I wouldn't be shocked. So I get it, the age and all of that, but he just kind of needs a better touchdown season, and we can get less catches and less yardage if we get a bump of 4 or 5 touchdowns, which I think is possible for a guy like Travis Kelce. That's all I have for you guys here. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. We'll be putting out a Dynasty Fallers video pretty soon, so check for that, and I will see you guys all in the next video.